Welcome to this edition of In-Depth Alaska. I'm Tracy Sinclair. Alaska's Senior Senator Lisa Murkowski sat down with our Washington D.C. reporter Josh Rultenberg in a wide-ranging discussion on topics from the Albertsons-Kroger merger to how she will work with the incoming administration. Here is that conversation.
The Albertsons-Kroger merger is not going through.
Not going through. Isn't that a good thing? Alaskans could have told them that this was not a good idea. We already have a situation in Alaska where our food prices are higher. Our access to food is just more limited when you have a smaller population and just not a lot of competition. So we saw this coming and said this is not going to be good for Alaskans. And so they spoke up. Alaskans spoke up. The delegation spoke up. This is one where I really give Representative Peltola a lot of credit. She really pushed out on that on the delegation side, and things throughout the process worked as they should. The FTC looked at it, says, don't think this is a good idea. Courts are involved. And now it appears that it is finally conclusively over. And when the companies themselves realize that it is and have walked away, I think we could have saved them a lot of trouble if they'd listened to Alaskans, but it's important because this is a food security issue. About access and about affordability.
Let's talk about what just passed the Senate, the Older Americans and Native Elder Act. Little late in the year, but either way it gets through and onto the House.
Yeah, it is. And when you think about making sure that we have available services for our older Americans, that our Native elders are able to again, receive services in a culturally appropriate way. These are some of the things that might not make the grand national news. The reporters in the hall that are trying to chase me down are not asking about this because this is actually good news legislation that just comes with the general pace of legislating around here. So it was good that we got that one through. I'm hopeful that before the Congress is over, that we will be successful with the workforce investment legislation that we've been working on. We've been kind of trying to advance that at the same time as we have Older Americans Act. So I think good authorizations or reauthorizations for people in Alaska and across the country.
There was a former federal judge that's going through some hot water back in Alaska who had dropped your name. Any comment on the status there? Well,
this is something that we're continuing to learn more about. Really, the awful, truly, in my view, heinous actions of a federal district court judge in Alaska. We have a process in Alaska that doesn't require judges to go through. We don't elect our judges, right? And at the federal level, this is a nomination process where these individuals have to go through a level of vetting, and to know that this man, Mr. Kindred, because I will not call him a judge anymore, he has lost the respect that came with that, with his actions. But what Mr. Kindred has done is he has violated the trust of Alaskans. He has just completely undercut the credibility, in my view, of the Alaska bar and of the judiciary there. One guy who thought that somehow or other that he, as a federal judge, would not be subject to the laws, but also just the laws of decency. And so more is coming out about him. There's some recent suggestions that he has made that he had access to the delegation and he could help women advance because of his connections. What I can tell you is what I have shared with others who have asked the question. Kindred never asked me to put anybody's name forward. I didn't have and nor have I had conversations with him about judicial, about vacancies. And so for him to suggest that somehow or other he had some status that elevated him, I think is wrong. But I think it goes to kind of the depravity of his character.
Somebody you did speak up for, a little bit more positive light, Mike Svrega, who is the first ambassador at large for Arctic Affairs. He was just confirmed in the fall.
Yep.
And like every presidential transition, typically political appointees end up resigning.
Right.
Two questions here. Do you think he should resign? And what do you think about the future of the position with the new administration?
Yeah. Well, first is an easy answer. No, I do not think he should resign. What happens with particularly ambassadorial positions? The incoming administration, the new president, will basically ask all to tender their resignation, and then they kind of sift through them as they're reviewing these posts to determine, do they accept the resignation now? Do they let that individual remain in place until such time as they process them? Keep in mind that when we enter the new Congress in January, we will have an extraordinary number of nominations to process. It will be cabinet secretaries. It will be lower level individuals. It will be ambassadors. It will be judges. As they say, the Senate is in the personnel business. It occupies a lot of time, and not just on the floor, but in the committees. And so if there is a new person to be named as Arctic ambassador, that's going to be a process that takes a while. You got to get the name out there, then they have to go through the vetting process, and then they go through a committee process, and then they have to get to the floor. And they're basically fighting for floor time against filling out the president's cabinet. And so it does take a period of time. So the question that the administration needs to ask is it better to leave that vacant, or is it better to leave the folks in there who have been doing the job, that are advancing United States interests in these various countries, or in Ambassador Sfrega's position in the Arctic? And I can tell you, there are multiple Arctic conferences that are coming up in the very near term, in the first quarter, and it would be a shame that we would not have that level of representation. Since Ambassador Sfrega has been on the job in the position since early October, he has been traveling to all of the Arctic countries and visiting with other Arctic ministers, ambassadors, talking through everything from defense in the Arctic to matters related to indigenous peoples within the Arctic. This is a man who is very, very, very knowledgeable in these areas, and it would be a shame to lose his expertise. So I'm certainly going to encourage the administration to look very carefully at Ambassador Sfrega and the value that he has brought to these very important issues.
Okay. Let me get to some end of the year stuff. Obviously, you guys got to get through the NDAA and the CR next week.
Yeah.
Let's start with the NDAA. Is this something that you can support, or do you feel that there's going to be any additions in next week? Or
well, the NDAA has passed the House, very strong bipartisan support over there. And what we anticipate is now over on the Senate side, we anticipate that we will take that up mid of next week. And it is not anticipated that there will be an amendment process. So pretty much what we see right now that's come over from that House, the negotiated product, is what we will have an opportunity to vote on. And based on what I have seen, I will be supporting it. The National Defense Authorization is too key. The fact that we will be able to provide a pay increase for enlisted folks is important. It's significant. And at a time when we see so much unrest around the country, we need to make sure that our military has what it is that they need.
And the CR?
The CR, it sounds like agreement is coming together in terms of how long we continue this budget resolution. It looks like it will be mid-March. So we're keeping an eye on that. It's not done until it's done, as we know. But we anticipate that we will be able to process that next week. There's also the disaster supplemental that is being worked out as we speak. I just met with my Interior team. I am the ranking member on the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee, and so we have been going back and forth with our counterparts in the House and on the other side of the aisle, tacking down the last of the items in our budget subcommittee. So I'm hopeful that we'll get things tidied up and ready to process for next week.
Okay. Well, you mentioned nominations, and I know obviously you've had several meetings and more are to come.
Yep.
What do you make of President-elect Trump's nominations? Do you have any concerns?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had, I think, I've got 2 more this afternoon after our sit down here. I think I will have met with 9 of President-elect Trump's nominees. And I'll tell you, there are men and women that are passionate about their level of service. And whether it's a focus on education or a focus on on energy, having people that are looking at this as an opportunity to serve, you can start your conversation off there, because that's important. These are hard jobs. Anybody that thinks that it's political patronage, you help me with the campaign and therefore you get this fun job. There is nothing fun about the responsibilities about being a cabinet member. And not that I've been one, but I get to be the one asking the tough questions to them when they're trying to defend the president's budget. I get to be the one that asks them the tough questions about how they have dropped the ball in this area or that area. It is hard. And even when you are agreeing on matters, say, for instance, take energy, because it's a great space where this incoming administration and many of us in Alaska feel like there's a lot of room for partnering. But sometimes you get frustrated because it's like, wait a minute, you say you're committed to these goals, but you can't execute them fast enough to make it happen. So it's not an easy job. I was sharing with somebody yesterday that I had a particularly good day yesterday because it was all energy all the time. And coming from an energy state, whether it's fossil fuels or whether it's clean energy solutions that we're pioneering in Alaska, to be able to talk with people who are really focused on these issues that are so important not only to our state but to the country, it was good. It was great.
Okay, so no red flags right now.
I have been paying attention to kind of what the media has been sharing, and I kind of put it right over here in the for whatever it's worth category. And then mostly around this table, I have an opportunity to ask these folks in private about some of the questions that I have about things that I have learned about them, or perhaps I've served with them before. I'm going to be meeting the nominee for OMB, who was in the first Trump administration. So I know him, but now I've got a lot more things to ask him about. But this is my time to fulfill my role as a United States Senator when it comes to nominees. I don't have the ability, nor the right, nor would I want to name somebody. That's the president's. That is clearly his. But what we as senators have, and only we as senators, because House members don't have this, is the power of advice and consent. The consent part of it is voting. Do I vote aye or do I vote nay? But the advice part is where I get to weigh in, where I get to have an active role. So I get to ask you all these questions. And some of it is maybe fed off, some of the rumor mill out there. There's allegation out there. How do you respond to that? Walk me through that. And some of it is, all right, share with me your policy directives. And I'm then taking that and I'm weighing that. Sometimes I make recommendations to them saying, this is going to be a real barrier to you over here. This, I'm not sure you're going to be able to get around that. And so this is a process that I think, I'm not sure that many in the country really think about the advice and consent. They think about the consent, which is the voting. They think about that part of it. But they're not really aware of the preliminaries that go. You also see the advice and consent role play out in committee, where it's in public and those questions are asked and answered publicly. But we've got a broader role, and I take my role very, very seriously. I like this part of it because I feel it gives me, as a representative from Alaska, the ability to share with people who are going to have a direct hand in policies that impact my state, to walk them through that map and say, do you know what it means to be able to provide for public safety in a state where 80% of your communities are not connected by road, which means that you can't drive in and out. That means you might get weathered if you're a state trooper trying to come in and out. How do you provide for public safety? And so it opens an awareness with these folks about some of the challenges that I have, and perhaps helps them understand a little bit more about why, when I am arguing for flexibility or a waiver, or it's going to cost us a little bit more up there, they can think back to that original meeting in my office when we walked through some of the challenges.
And sorry, speaking of nominees, we're just about to bump up to our next meeting here. So if you have one quick question, that's fine.
All right. Well, let me just ask you, kind of a two-part. We'll end on this. Obviously, you find yourself in a very interesting position as a modern-day moderate Republican, right? And there don't seem to be that many, if you'll allow me to say that. You, Susan Collins, are really kind of in the middle of these headlines here. So let me ask you just, what do you think about the position you're in right now, given the fact that you are going to have so much national attention coming your way? Do you think that that's good for Alaska in your current position? And also, you've had some past friction with Donald Trump when he was in the White House. So if you could just kind of summarize all of that.
Sure. I am no stranger to being under the spotlight, if you will, and spotlight not in a maybe a positive way, but under the glaring spotlight of, well, she hasn't lined up instinctively in a knee-jerk reaction with her party. What do you mean she's asking questions? What do you mean she has not determined where she's going to go? I mean, this is her party's nominee. Of course she would do that. Well, I am a Republican, but I answer to the people of this state of Alaska, whether they voted for me or not, whether they are Republican, whether they're Democrat, Green, Independent, doesn't make any difference. I answer to all of them, and I take that responsibility very, very seriously. I don't have a base that is all that I look to. I have to look to how I represent all Alaska's interests. And so I take the responsibility of when it comes to nominations, vetting people, whether it is President Trump or whether it is President Biden, whether it is President Bush or whether it is President Obama. I have made it through now 2 decades of different administrations, 2 Republican administrations, 2 Democrat administrations. And I have had to figure out how not only I, Lisa Murkowski, engage with these administrations, but how I can best represent Alaska's interest with an administration. We're concluding the Biden administration after 4 years. And it's been an administration that is not fully supportive, and I'm being a little bit cynical when I say that, of some of Alaska's resource issues. They have not been supportive. It has been a hard 4 years with that. And yet, within this administration, I was able to navigate a path that made sure that the commitment to open up Willow within the National Petroleum Reserve was advanced under the Biden administration. That did not just happen by accident. That happened because there were relationships that were built where I need to be able to talk to you, I need to have you talk to me so that we can get some things done. I think we're going to see, finally, after 3 decades plus of trying to get 11-mile, 1-lane gravel non-commercial use road so that the people of King Cove can safely gain access to an all-weather airport in Coal Bay. I think you're going to see that conveyance that is advanced under this administration. And it's going to come about because of a commitment that I received, that I have held the administration accountable to. Now, I don't always see eye to eye with President-elect Trump. I get that, but there's a lot of common ground that we have, that I will have with his administration. I demonstrated that in the first administration. It was my legislation that was incorporated as Title II of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that moved to open up the lease sales in the 1002 area with ANWR. That had been a 40-year fight, and President Trump was able to sign that into law. We're going to need him to help us again with that, but we were able to work on these issues. And so there are areas where I am not going to be in alignment, just as I was not in alignment with President Bush on some of his priorities, but we still managed to work together. So whether it is a Bush, Biden, Trump, Obama, my job is not to find areas where I'm going to disagree with the administration and poke fingers in the eye. My job for the people of Alaska is to figure out how I can work in their best interest with an administration who wants to help a resource state like ours. And it's not just about resources. There's so many other areas where we're going to be able to find common ground and work together. So I'm going to be looking for avenues of opportunity, not for areas of division. That's how I roll, and I think it has gained me some respect over the years, and people should expect no different as we enter the second Trump administration. I'm looking forward to working with new partners and working to help advance them be successful. Because if they're successful, the country's going to be successful, Alaska's going to be successful.
Thank you to Senator Murkowski for speaking with Josh Rultenberg from our Washington, D.C. Bureau. And thank you for listening to In Depth Alaska. Please like and subscribe to this podcast.